Hey everybody, hopefully you watched the first 2 minutes of that Math Antics video, so it kind of gives you a little bit of explanation of why what we're going to do works. It also has some vocabulary in there, which I'm going to use, which is the word reciprocal. So if you haven't watched that video, you really need to go back. Again, you're only watching the first 2 minutes. I know it's 5 minutes long. The reason that I cut it off, or not that I cut it off, that I asked you to only watch 2 minutes, was because some of the stuff that he's going to do in that video, we aren't going to do this year. So I don't want you to look at problems that we aren't going to do. You will in the future do them, and you'll be able to do them exactly the same way that we're doing them today. They're just a tiny bit harder, that's all. So that's why I didn't want you to go past that 2 minute mark, maybe 2:05 mark, when he starts doing problems. So let's say, like, we're dividing fractions and whole numbers today. Normally we would start with pictures. I'm going to tell you that I find it really difficult to do pictures with this not being in school, because otherwise we'd be using some little manipulatives and things like that. So you don't have those materials. So we're going to move right to the algorithm today. Again, we're dividing fractions and whole numbers. So that means we're going to have fractions as the divisor and whole numbers as a dividend. We're also going to have whole numbers as a dividend and fractions as a divisor. So we'll see both fractions and whole numbers in both spaces. And we're going to talk about how that kind of affects our answer a little bit as well. Okay. So first I'm going to talk about steps. And there's not too many things for us to do. So because we have a whole number, we're talking about whole numbers and fractions and doing operations. We're going to be giving our whole number denominator of 1, just like we did when we multiplied fractions and whole numbers. We gave that whole number a denominator of 1. And really step 2 is all the work that we're going to do. So I call it keep, change, flip. And again, if you watch the Math Antics video, he talked about what reciprocals are. He actually talks about why reciprocals work for doing division. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and multiply. And then just like all of our fraction stuff, at the end, if we can simplify, we're going to go ahead and simplify. But this step here, step number 2, keep, change, flip, that's going to be the part that's really different. Once we do that, then you're going to be looking at a multiplication problem, which we just finished multiplying fractions. So that should be pretty familiar because we've been working on that for a long time now. And that's why we have to do multiplying fractions before we do dividing fractions. You have to know how to multiply a little bit before we can divide fractions. So let's take a look at an example problem here. And I'm going to go through these exact steps that are right here. And you can go through them with me. If you want, please pause the video, take out your notebook, and you can write them down with me. That way you'll get a better understanding of how to do this. So let's take a look at the first problem. One thing I'm going to do, just because it's text, I'm going to just write it myself again. This way I can write it the way I want. So I have 3 divided by 1/4. And remember, step 1 is to take the whole number and give it a denominator of 1. So there's my whole number of 3. I'm giving it a denominator of 1. Now, here's the most important part, okay? It's that keep, change, flip part. So we're going to keep the first fraction the same. So I'm going to write it over here. That's keep. That's the same. I'm going to change the division symbol. It's always going to be the division symbol that we're changing, and we're changing it to multiplication. And then finally, let's use a different color. We're going to flip. So when we talk about flipping the fraction, we're actually getting the reciprocal, which is what the guy in Math Antics talked about, which was just taking the denominator and the numerator and kind of flipping it over, right? So instead of having 1/4, I'm going to go ahead and make my numerator 4 and my denominator 1. And now I have a multiplying fractions question here, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this new multiplication problem, and I'm going to go ahead and multiply, right? So we know from before we can multiply numerators, which 3, I'm going to put my answer above here. So 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 1 is 1. And, and 12 over 1 just gives us the answer of 12. So that's to simplify. So that's our first one. Pretty simple. Again, keep, change, flip is really the new part, because we're going to get a multiplication of fractions problem afterward, and we just finished doing that. So remember, the flip part is called the reciprocal, right? So when we flip a fraction over, meaning taking the denominator, making it the numerator, making the numerator the denominator. That's called the reciprocal of the fraction. And again, the math antics video, he kind of explains how that works with dividing fractions, okay? So if we were dividing here, we're going to get 12. So 3 divided by 1/4 is 12. The question is really asking us, how many 1/4 size groups are there in the number 3? So it's telling us that there are 12 1/4 size sections in the number 3. We could draw a picture for that. We could take 3 whole things, break them all up into 4 pieces, and then you count up how many pieces there are, right? Because each one of those pieces is 1/4. There would be 12 pieces. So again, this answer is telling us that there are 12 1/4 size pieces in the whole number 3. Let's take a look at the next one. This one starts with a fraction, and then we have our whole number separately, or second, I'm sorry. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm actually taking 1/5, and I'm dividing that by 2, okay? So I'm going to rewrite, like I said before, I like to rewrite it. Make my division symbol nicer. And then I'm going to go ahead and give my whole number of 2 a denominator of 1. To get started right away, our next step is keep, which is keep the first fraction the same, 1/5. Our next part is change, which is change that division sign to multiplication. And then finally we have flip, which again is the reciprocal, right? So we're taking the numerator and we're making that the denominator. And I'm taking the denominator and making that the numerator. And now I have a nice, easy multiplication sentence, a fraction multiplication sentence. So we're going to multiply numerators. We're going to multiply denominators. And then 1/10 is in simplest form, so that's our answer. So what this question is telling us is that if we took a 1/5 size piece and we divided it into 2 pieces, we would get 1/10. Okay, again, we could draw a picture to show that. We could show this 1/5 being cut again, cutting it in half here because, right, we're getting 2 pieces. So it's showing us that 1/10 would be the size of that piece. So I want you to notice, and I'm going to go back to the first question. We started with a whole number here, right? And our answer was a whole number. Here, we started with a fraction, and our answer was a fraction. So we need to make sure that that's happening every time, because that's how it's going to work. Is when we're using fractions and whole numbers, when we have the dividend being a fraction, which is the first number, the dividend, is being divided by the whole number, we're going to get a fraction as an answer, just like this question here. If, like our first question, our dividend is a whole number and we're dividing by a fraction, then our answer is a whole number. I'm going to do 2 more really quick just for us to, again, get comfortable with. And then you guys are going to be working on these today. And then tomorrow we're going to add some word problems in, and that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So I'll post another video talking about those word problems tomorrow. So, all right, let's start. We have 1/4 divided by 6. Let us rewrite 1/4 divided by 6. Remember, the first step is to put the whole number or give the whole number a denominator of 1. Then we're going to go ahead and do our keep. So keep 1/4 the way it is. We're going to change the division to multiplication. And then we're going to flip or get the reciprocal of this fraction, right? Of this whole number in this case, or this fraction 6/1. So remember again that means we're going to take the denominator, that's going to be on top, and our numerator is going to the bottom. We're switching those two. That's the reciprocal of this fraction. And then we can go ahead and multiply here. 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times 6 is 24. And that is in simplest form. Notice, again, we start with a fraction. Our answer is a fraction. So that's one way we can check and make sure we're kind of in the right spot here. We could go ahead and say, oh, look, I have a fraction to start. My answer is a fraction. I probably did this correctly. All right, last one. So Let's look at this one here. We should notice because it starts with a fraction, our answer should be a fraction, okay? So we have 1/6 divided by 3. And again, our first step, put the whole number over 1, or give the whole number a denominator of 1. And then we're going to get into our keep. So 1/6 is going to stay the same. And then the next thing we're doing is changing the division symbol to multiplication. And finally, we're going to flip or get the reciprocal of the second number of fraction. So it looks good to me because we had started with a fraction. It looks like we're going to get a fraction for our answer. So let's just make sure we do. 1 times 1 is 1. And 6 times 3, 18. And look at that. We have a fraction for our answer. We started with a fraction. All right, guys. So just make sure that you are doing it in this specific order. It has to be the first fraction that stays the same, whether it's a whole number or a fraction, the first one, right? Right here, this first one is the one that stays the same, okay? So our dividend is staying exactly where it is. It's staying at the first part of our problem when we rewrite it. We're always changing from division to multiplication. And then we're always flipping the second fraction, okay? We're getting the reciprocal. We're flipping over that second fraction, all right? So again, hopefully you watched the Math Antics video. He talks a little bit about reciprocals, and he kind of tells you why flipping over a fraction works. So if you didn't, please go back and watch it, because I'll give you a hint. There might be a bonus on a test or a quiz that comes out of the video the Math Antics video. All right, guys, good luck. We have a good day.